here. We're going to be talking about the federal stimulus and some of the things as a Republican caucus we think are very important. I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson. Back in 2009, the last time the state received large amounts of federal funding, Governor Doyle, with the Democrat legislature, did turn things over to the Joint Finance Committee to help dish out the money. We had issued a bill asking for the same favor this time, part of the way we believe the Constitution states, but he vetoed that, and so we're here now to make some recommendations so the public kind of see our views and where we think the different federal stimulus money should be appropriated. I'm going to start things out. Representative Spiros is here, Representative Rosar, and Representative Callahan will kind of hit the different points. First, I'm going to talk about our focus on aid to households. We would like to see about $1 billion of this give the equivalent of about a 10% return of taxes paid by our property owners statewide. They had a tough year as well, trying to come up with the tax money for their property taxes, and this would be direct aid to them. The people most impacted by the pandemic are the hardworking Wisconsin taxpayer, so they should see this additional state aid coming to them out of the pandemic. This is their money, and they deserve a break. Households were hit hard by the pandemic. The state unemployment rate rose to 14.8% back in April of 2020. It was only 3.8% in February. Total wages and salaries paid here in the state of Wisconsin last year dropped 0.5%. And Wisconsin's manufacturing sector saw a $993 million, or about a 3.4% decline in that wages over the year. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many Wisconsin residents were forced to stay home as businesses were shut down under the government mandates. Unfortunately, some of our friends and neighbors were laid off, while others saw their hours drastically reduced. So this aid is aimed at them to try to help them, be it with their property taxes, maybe be able to even use it if they pay their property taxes twice a year. So we think it deserves to go back to the people, and this will be an area we would like to see the governor take our recommendation and act on. Now with more on small business and tourism, Representative Spiros.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for being here, like Pat said. And, for the tourism area, we saw a huge hit in tourism. Leisure and hospitality sector lost 61,600 jobs over the past year. Our construction lost 8,000 jobs over the past year. And the tourism could take a hit of $10 billion. Now the positive of that is, actually up north, people want to get away, and you can tell because outdoor activities actually increased, which was something I know that typically when we don't have that much time, because usually our winters are a lot worse than what we have now, people want to get out. So we did see that, but basically from the small business sector, restaurants were hurt probably the most when you take a look at it. And we just put a bill together for that to help the restaurants, just got passed and signed into law by the governor. But 83% of restaurant operators say total volume sales in January 2021 were lower than January 2020. And I think it's just, again, people being nervous about getting out there. But one area that we can agree with the governor on when it comes down to this money that's coming from the federal government is the tourism dollars and the money that's going to small business. Now, the governor basically has indicated that he'd like to put $50 million in tourism out of the money that's coming in from the federal government, and $600 million to help support small business. I know our small businesses, especially like the one we're in today, definitely could use the help, and our tourism industry needs a boost as well. So it's something I believe that the Republican caucus, all of us can get behind, and we're hopeful that we move forward with that, and we see Wisconsin recover with the help of the federal government and the help of this money going to those areas. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Representative Rosar.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Well, thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate you coming out on this windy, sunny day. $3.2 billion is a lot of money. And so when you talk about Wisconsin getting that as a federal stimulus from the American Rescue Act of 2021, that's a tremendous ability to help a lot of people in our state. When I was elected in November to the state assembly, I was really proud to be part of the people's house. I felt that the assembly people that were elected were the closest to the people. We represent about 57,000 people. And so we're out and about in our districts talking to our constituents. When I heard about this $3.2 billion, I thought, you know, it would be really great to talk to the people and see what the people need from this stimulus package. So the state assembly passed SB 183, which asked for some legislative oversight of that money. And I was disappointed in that, because I thought with that amount of money, we ought to be talking to the people that are closest to the people in order to get their input about how that money could be used. When the governor vetoed that bill, I saw it as just a real disappointment in missing an opportunity to talk to those of us that believe we're the people's house and we are closest to the people to find out what their needs are. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes on long-term care and the long-term care workforce. As you may know, I'm also a Wood County Board Supervisor, and in Wood County we own a nursing home. Several years ago, I'm not sure how many it was now, but there were people on our Wood County Board that wanted to have us get out of the nursing home business. They didn't believe that counties had any business owning a nursing home. As chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, I fought really hard to keep a nonprofit nursing home in our county. We were successful in doing so. We do put some tax levy dollars into that nursing home because we feel that it's very, very important to care for those who are the most vulnerable in our community. You may know that 45% of Wisconsin's 6,598 COVID deaths occurred in Wisconsin's long-term care facilities, which is nearly about 3,000 people. Our long-term care facilities have really taken the brunt of things during this pandemic. We had to socially isolate our vulnerable population, keep them from visiting family and friends. Staff worked really long hours to provide care. It was also disappointing to me that less than 10% of the governor's CARES Act discretionary funding went directly to long-term care facilities. It's been a very difficult year for that industry, and I believe they really deserve more of the funding in order to keep themselves whole. You may know that Neillsville Care and Rehab is closing in Neillsville. Neillsville is part of my district. It is a not-for-profit organization. The hospital there, we have a new hospital in Neillsville with Marshfield Clinic building that new hospital, and this care and rehab facility was connected to that hospital. They shared a lot of support services like the dietary and the laundry. And I'm sure that with the increased overhead of not sharing that with the hospital, caused them to have to relocate their residents. Now those residents are going out of the community, they're going further away from their friends and family. I'm just wondering in the back of my mind if a little help wouldn't have been able to keep that facility open, and that help coming from stimulus dollars that would have helped them to pay some overhead costs. Not only has it been difficult on these facilities, but it's also been difficult to find folks to work at these facilities. So the CNAs and the nurses who have worked very long hours and very hard protecting our vulnerable, I believe that we need to do some direct payments to them to reward them, and we could use some of this stimulus money for that. The government has been paying for testing. I don't know if you know that long-term care facilities have been required to sometimes do twice a week testing on their staff and residents, depending on how many numbers they've had of COVID patients. Those testing payments are up in June, and the government is no longer going to pay for those. So it would be nice to have some monies go into testing so that we can do the surveillance and the contact tracing and the things that we need to do in order to keep our COVID cases down in our long-term care facilities. For a long time, there's been poor Medicaid reimbursement to residents in nursing homes, and so using some of this money to increase that reimbursement would be really nice. There's been a lot of lost revenue in our long-term care facilities because census has been down. People have done whatever they've needed to do to keep patients from going into the nursing homes. And so they've used home health care, they've used family members, and so there just hasn't been enough money coming into long-term care facilities to cover that lost revenue. Overhead stays the same no matter how many people you have in a long-term care facility, and it'd be really nice to use some of that money to cover the overhead. So we really would like a lot of this money to go to long-term care facilities and then to some direct payment to the staff that's been keeping vulnerable populations safe over these last months. So with those remarks, I'd like to turn it over to Representative Callahan.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I catch my breath after taking that thing off. When I heard yesterday that the governor vetoed Senate Bill 183, I was extremely disappointed. This legislation would have given my constituents a voice when it comes to this federal stimulus money that is being allocated for our state. And while the governor has decided to go it alone, I can tell you that the folks at the 35th Assembly District would be prioritizing these allocations after a difficult year. Businesses have been closing their doors due to the governor's mandates, and it's important that we look to invest in our small businesses, especially the ones that are hurting, so we can revitalize our local economies. A big way we can do this is through broadband expansion and ensuring rural businesses have the resources they need to compete in this digital economy. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need for broadband in northern Wisconsin, which is why our proposal of $500 million investment in broadband expansion grants should be considered. My legislative Republican colleagues did a great job in providing $44 million in broadband grants last budget cycle, but the $500 million in federal money would have been a significant step in the right direction for northern Wisconsin. In the district I represent, I have heard about businesses that have sadly had to close their doors for good, like many others across the state. Just yesterday, during a full day of meetings at Antigo, I spoke with a constituent about one local restaurant in particular. Prior to the pandemic, like many, this business was doing very well. Today, they're still in business, but just making it by. The constituent told me, quote, "That's not good enough," end quote. This hit home for me because our businesses shouldn't just be getting by. They should be thriving in Wisconsin. And I was glad to see the governor propose additional funding for assisting our businesses and broadband expansion grants through the $3.2 billion in federal funds headed our way. However, I hope he rethinks the amounts on funding for these priorities. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Representative Snyder.
All right, thank you. And we hope that, you know, the money allocated for small businesses comes to the north, comes to the portions of rural Wisconsin. City of Milwaukee and Madison, they're already getting federal funds of their own beyond what this is coming to the state. So I hope the governor will, you know, reach out to these smaller communities and be able to help them do this. Now, you know, these are recommendations we have, but we will be working on legislative ideas to be able to push these ideas through the legislature, and hopefully then the governor will sign those. So with that, I guess we'll open it up for questions.